This is Colin Cooch from the Office of the Clerk of the Board. Is this member O'Neill phoning in?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Meeting will start in a few minutes, and for now, I'll just have you go on mute until we start the show.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to start in a few minutes, and for now, just have you go on mute for.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start the meeting as a committee of the whole is what we're going to do. We need to have 10 people here, but the clerk's office has informed me that the person on the speakerphone does not count towards a quorum. But once we have a quorum, who's on the speaker? Who's calling in remotely? Teresa?
Teresa O'Neill.
Hey, Teresa, it's Mike. Okay.
Hi.
What we've learned is that once we have a quorum, then your vote counts. But your presence up in space does not count towards our quorum, which I don't understand at all. But anyway, I trust the clerk, and Colin's very, very good. So, first of all, I'm taping the Warrior game. Nobody say anything. Okay? My son and father are not to text me. Nobody say anything about the Warriors game. All right.
Mr. Chairman, if it helps, I noticed the arrival of our colleague Yan Zhao, and I believe that may give us a sufficient number per quorum.
Thank you. Yan is here, so we will now resume our board with a quorum +1. We'll start out with the roll call. And
Colin has stepped away a brief moment to see if he can promote some water for us.
So, Chris, why don't we start with you? Introduce yourself and where you're from. We'll just go around.
Chris Clark, City of Mountain View.
Ann Bybee, City of Campbell.
Kathy Watanabe, City of Santa Clara.
Oops, turn on your microphone to the right of your monitor. Your microphone buttons are on the right side of your monitors.
Okay. John McKay, City of Morgan Hill.
Mike Wasserman, D1 Supervisor.
Joe Simidian, District 5.
Jeannie Bruin, City of Los Altos.
And John Willie, Cupertino.
Yan Zhao, City of Saratoga.
Peter Hertan, Roads Commission.
Russ Melton, City of Sunnyvale.
Oh, help with that button just to show where your microphone speaker button is, Russ. It's to the right of the monitor. Yep, if you need it. And what I do as chair with this and with my vice chair, Supervisor Simidian, I look left and right for the red light on. So if your red light's on, you're telling me you want to be recognized to speak. So please turn it off unless you do wish to be recognized to speak at this time. Also, before we move on to public comment, to the right of your screen are 3 buttons, call, microphone, and input. If your input button is lit up blue, then you don't get to see what's overhead. If it's lit up blue, press it once. It'll go dark, and you'll be able to see the PowerPoint presentation on your screen as well as above you. With that, we'll move on to public comment, which is the opportunity for anyone to speak about anything not on tonight's agenda. Seeing none and having no speaker cards, we'll consider item 2. I thought I saw Doug here. Just listening. Okay, Douglas, just didn't want to miss you. We'll move on to item number 3, which is approval of the consent calendar, which per our agenda includes items 5 and 6. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on either 5 or 6? Seeing none, I'll turn to my committee members for a motion.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you. Motion to approve and a second. Any discussion on these items? Okay, with that, I'll call for the question for the approval of items 5 and 6. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Thank you. Opposed was none. That passes unanimously, Colin.
Yes.
Okay, we now move on to item number 4, which is to discuss and approve forwarding a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to approve the County Expressway Implementation Plan. And I see Ellen, Barry, Harry, and I also want to acknowledge Anant and Koa as being here. And Harry, I will turn things over to you. This is our Director of Roads and Airports.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will do introductions. Harry Freitas, I'm the Director of Roads and Airports, joined by Barry Yang, our Deputy Director for Capital Projects, Infrastructure Development. Ellen Talbo is the County Transportation Planner, and here in support, Nath Prasad, County's Traffic Engineer, and Qua Vo, who manages our capital delivery functions. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Qua. I should have pronounced that correctly.
Yeah. So we're going to break this up into a couple of pieces, and we're going to hopefully go over a little bit of historical context, and I'll take some of the slides, and we'll have Barry take on part of the discussion. Certainly, we're very prepared to discuss our recommendations as we move forward. So the historical context for the county's expressways, they're very important pieces of transportation and mobility infrastructure for this county. And the county is unique in that it has an expressway system, and more importantly, an urban expressway system. The majority of counties, particularly urban counties in the state of California, do not have the benefit of a system such as ours. It was built organically over time with a combination of land development and planning and dedication and acquisition. So it's a significant investment that the county operates. In 2003 and 2008, we adopted our first true planning documents, and we worked with all the cities in the county and our stakeholders in developing those documents. We identified in basically in about 2010 the need to 2012 the need to update our planning document. We formed a technical working group and a policy advisory board to work on an Expressway 2040 plan. And for those of you who are familiar with the work on that plan, it was largely an exercise in discussing the future of a system that was, I would say, significantly underfunded from a capital standpoint. That is to say that we were discussing planning without a funding source. And that can lead to what I'd call some long discussions. Our last PAB meeting, that's your board, and by the way, I'll just mention that the technical working group essentially consists of your respective staffs from your cities, whether they be in planning departments, departments of transportation, or public works departments, their leadership on the staff of your cities. The last PA meeting was held in August 2016. In 2016, the state of California was discussing really the future of its transportation systems in the context of SB 1. And locally here, Santa Clara County recognized mobility problems in the county and a need for moving forward improvements to our abysmal lack of paving in the county and just the mobility needs of such a quick, fast-growing area. So Measure B was passed by the voters of Santa Clara County and immediately was embroiled in a lawsuit. We really haven't met since then, and I wanted to address that question because now it's time to talk about how we're going to deliver the projects for the voters who entrusted us with this funding. So now that funding is established, we're focusing on the consensus needed for prioritization of the projects that we're about to describe. Next slide. So the Measure B Expressway program. Measure B has 7 funding categories. It's a very broad and a program that goes from bicycles and pedestrian improvements all the way to underground subways in the form of BART. In the program, there is a category of a funding category or a project category called the Expressway program. It's explicit to the Expressway, and the county is staffed with delivering those projects. And we're also tasked with prioritizing and putting them into an order that makes sense and that all of our constituent cities can get behind. The program of that $750 million consists of 20 projects. And that's throughout the system. And then a subset of the program, a system-wide project, if you will, and it's not a numbered project, is called ITS support. It's a component of the $750 million. And that is intelligent transportation systems, traffic signal coordination, progression, to allow our roadways, the expressways themselves, to operate at maximum efficiency. Now, the VTA has asked and requires that our Policy Advisory Board send recommendations to our Board of Supervisors prior to execution of the first funding agreement. And we are ready to execute our first funding agreement. The first funding agreement is probably for $50 million. That's what the VTA has identified. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our Deputy Director, Barry Eng, to talk about the method and what we're asking to get done today.
Thank you, Harry. Once again, Barry Eng, Deputy Director of Infrastructure Development for County Roads. The next few slides will hopefully shed some light on how we prioritize the 20 projects that Harry described for you. You have a Christmas present in May in front of you. It's an 11 by 17 sheet of paper. I'm going to get there, but I just wanted to identify that that in itself is our prioritization list. So how did we get there? You need to go back one slide there, Ellen. Thank you. So we had criteria from the VTA that they adopted in October of 2017 that we applied to the ranking of these projects. We also, as Harry described, met with each of the cities, each of staff from your cities, to talk through our prioritization intent. We did that largely in the summer, last summer of 2018. We had what were called Expressway stakeholder meetings. We tried to get their input via questionnaires, thoughtful questionnaires that asked a lot of questions about the expressways. But in particular, we asked, is there any priorities that you see in the Measure B Expressway program? And what we actually heard was not a lot. They said, County, you go ahead and take those VTA guidelines and apply them, and we'll see what happens. So we did that, and then we held a technical working group meeting in March, just a couple months ago, and we previewed our work. And so we think that through all of our work, we arrived at an initial plan that's going to be flexible throughout the program, but we had to start somewhere. So Ellen, let's take a look at the VTA's board-adopted criteria that we used. These are, in many respects, common sense, project readiness. I translate that into shovel readiness. I'm sure you've heard that term before. Many of the projects that made it into Measure B had already been worked on at some point, and so there's some projects were advanced more than others, and so those are the ones that scored high in this criteria. Complexity, pardon me. Complexity is how complex is the project engineering-wise or right-of-way wise or other issues-wise. Geographic balance and public impact, I kind of translated that into disruption. How disruptive will the construction be and in a particular corridor? So we kind of rank them on that basis. Timing of other funding sources. So Harry did not go into detail on this, but the $750 million program requires a local match, 10% for each project. And so we considered, is that local match readily identified? Has it already been identified? Safety, kind of a no-brainer. Do we have a crash history in any particular corridor in a project area? Public support, is there a groundswell of public support for any of the particular projects that we should consider? Gap closure. Are we solving with the project a gap in lane connectivity? And to those 7 criteria that were adopted by the board, we added 2 as a staff that we thought were also somewhat important to consider. Congestion relief. I think that kind of transcends the entire program, but is there an acute pain point that a particular project wants to solve? And it would score higher in our criteria if we were solving that pain point. And last but not least, project duration. Is a project going to take a while? Should it kind of mellow down in the list because we know it's going to take a long time to get to complete all the work? Extended planning, design, or construction. So those are the 9 criteria that we used. It's probably important to note that none of these criteria rose above any of the other. These are 9 equally weighted criteria. And instead of using a numeric scoring system, trying to divide up every criteria into 100 points, we used a simplified color scoring mechanism. So on your Christmas present, you'll see that next to every project there is what we call a color cube. That is the score, and each criteria is numbered 1 through 9, and each of those 9 criteria received a color score from our process that indicates something. So green means that criteria scored well, good. Yellow is kind of neutral, and red is challenging. So that's the key to the color cube. And the results is in front of you. We call it your placemat. You can eat off it if you like. One side of it is a map. We thought a map would be helpful. If you're a visual person, you can kind of see where all the projects are. So the project numbers occur in a circle. And I'll get to why the circles are green, yellow, or red in a moment, but at least the projects are all identified. And the only part of the map that's, there's an inset that shows the South County Santa Teresa corridor with projects 3 and 16 on them. So the other side of the Christmas present placemat is tabular. So this is where we have all the key facts about the project. At the top of the tabular side is our 9 criteria labeled for your convenience. Column 1 is the project number. Column 2 is the project name. We have a description, basically, of what the project's going to accomplish. We have some notes as to kind of basic status of the project. And then next to the color cube is the cost, approximate cost in 2015, Measure B kind of creation dollars. These were the respective estimates that staff used when assembling the measure. And then we have the color cube itself. So in general, if you'll look at those color cubes, you'll notice a couple of things. The more green in a color cube, the more a project rose to the top of the list. The more yellow squares, and this is just a generalism because you'll probably catch me on one of the cubes or 2 of the cubes where they kind of don't exactly align with what I'm saying, but in general, in the middle of the list, there's more yellow than green or red, and then towards the bottom of the list, there's more red than green or yellow. We have kind of identified some natural breaks in the scoring. So projects 1 through 8B are generally our green category. This is our first group of projects that we're going to attack. Then there's the mid-range projects 9 through 13, which are kind of bordered by a yellow border. And those are the medium range. And then the red are obviously the longer term, or for some reason, the more challenging ones that are lurking at the bottom of the list because of the scoring. And then at the very bottom of the list, there is an unranked project. Well, it's ranked in the sense that it has a lot of green, but it is a project that doesn't have a specific location yet. It is the Expressway ITS improvements, and it's a category of about $17.5 million that are going towards technology improvements like fiber optics to interconnect signals and install camera systems, things like that. So that last project on the bottom of the list is going to occur in bits and pieces throughout the program.
And Barry, if I may, by your scoring system, that last one on the bottom has more green than any other project.
Right.
So it scored the highest. It's down at the bottom simply because it's not a specific project.
Correct.
A street.
Correct.
Okay.
And originally we had it at the top of the list. I think Harry said, put that thing at the bottom. And I said, why?
Okay, but
I blame Harry.
Just good. I do the same often. But just for us, though, that annual expense IT signal system that scored 7 greens is something that would be ongoing throughout the project, throughout the time.
Right, and it's not $17.5 million annually. It's a lump sum of $17.5 million that will be spent in smaller chunks. So, for example, I have a slide later that'll show you the investments that we're planning to make in the first 2 years.
I'm sorry, far to the left bottom corner it says annual.
Correct. Well,
Not
and that's a
17.5?
misnomer of sorts. So it should have just been, it should have been blank. It should have been blank.
So
Sorry
it's not,
about that.
it's not 17.5 million annually for that expense.
Correct.
Thank
So
you.
that is a misnomer. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yep.
Okay. Rather than I wouldn't go through every project on this list for you, but I do want to call special attention to what we are calling kind of the major mega projects. And that to us is things that are, let's just say for argument's sake, over 40 million. And that's projects 8A, 8B, and 9, right in the middle of the list. This is the Lawrence Expressway grade separation between Reed, Monroe, and Arquez, and then we have Lawrence Expressway grade separation at Homestead, and then the next phase of San Tomas widening between Homestead and Stevens Creek. These are large, challenging projects, and the only reason I make note of that is I'll be telling you probably a couple times that we're not going to wait until the middle of the program to attack these projects. We are going to start work on them right away. It's just going to take a while to get to completion. And let's switch to the next slide on. That leads me to what I'll call some important caveats about our work. The lower a position in this list does not mean that we're going to wait on getting to work on it. It just means that that's the expected kind of completion of the project within the overall program. And then a big important caveat is that the order of these projects may change, will likely change as we get started. As we discover an issue on a certain project that sort of sends it sideways and we have to regroup, it might sink lower in the list. And if something gets overcome in terms of an issue, it might move a project up. So remember, it wants to flex throughout the program. All right, next slide, Ellen. This just is the philosophy that I think we have in Roads and Airports under Harry and myself in terms of delivering projects. We want to deliver this program in a partnership kind of way. So we can't do it without the partners of each of the cities, your cities, and working with the VTA. So that's kind of principle number one. We definitely want to be accountable in terms of all the project scopes and the costs. Cost control is going to be essential. And then once we commit to doing a project with a certain schedule, staying with that commitment. We are going to be very transparent about how we go about things, and we are going to try to engage the public early and often as necessary throughout the program to make sure that they are aware of what's going on. And we want to be efficient. I'm a big believer in making sure that every dollar is spent to its maximum ability, and so whether it's the engineering work or the construction, we're going to try to do this as efficiently as possible. Next slide, Ellen. We know that we need some help, though. We know that we need some help. So we're going to seek assistance from what we call a program management entity. You might translate that into consultant support, but it could be anything. But what we really need help doing is making sure that the scope of each project, the schedule of each project, and the costs are all validated so that we stay within the $750 million, that we get this thing done in the lifespan of the tax measure, and that the scope achieves what we were trying to. We're going to need help kind of sequencing things because these expressways are already crowded and trying to squeeze in work so that we don't disrupt or we have minimal disruption. That's important. So that's what's meant by sequencing and phasing. We're going to look at alternative project delivery, and that may not be a familiar phrase to you, to all of you, but sometimes we use different approaches. Rather than design a project, put it out to bid, and then build it, sometimes we try to accelerate and make things more efficient. We use, I'm sure some of you have heard design build. We're going to look at those things with our resource support. And finally, we need to look at financing options on these mega projects, because $440 million for Lawrence Expressway isn't just going to materialize. It's going to grow over time with the program. And if we want to work on it earlier than later, then we're probably going to need to explore financing it within the program context.
And with the prospect of being reimbursed at a future date.
Yes, everything's reimbursable, but
I just wanted to include that.
yeah, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. There's this local match component, there's the reimbursable component. We have to live within those constraints. So we have an initial snapshot of what we'd like to do with the first $50 million that has been assured by the VTA. They voted on it, and the board, excuse me. Some of you are on the board. And what it looks like is this. For the fiscal year we're about to embark upon, we intend to at least start the process on $24.1 million worth of work. We are going to take on projects 1, 2A, and 2B. We are going to take on about $3 million worth of ITS work. That's Intelligent Transportation System work. That's that technology improvements to keep traffic flowing well. And we're going to, Morgan Hill is also almost ready to go with its project number 3, and that should be within that first $24.1 million of work. The next year, we're going to get started with another $19.4 million tranche, if you will, and it's going to look like projects 4, 5, 6A, and 6B kind of in order, as well as another bunch of ITS work. And if you do the math, that's going to leave us with $6.5 million balance left over. That's what we're going to use to engage some program management resources. We're going to take on some work on those mega projects that are further down the list. And we're also going to set aside a little bit of a contingency in case something comes up, as it always does with programs like this, with projects like these. So that's our plan for the first $50 million over the next 2 fiscal years. And our final slide, next steps. If we are successful and everyone kind of agrees with our prioritization plan, your Christmas present placemat, then we'll send that, hopefully you'll send that recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, who will approve it. We'll begin delivering projects. We'll look at procuring any program management resources that we need. And it's never too early to plan ahead, so we're going to strategize the next 2-year funding cycle after fiscal year 2021. So that is, at a high level, our presentation for you. I think although you've been good about asking questions, we'll take any questions at this point.
Thank you. I appreciate your presentation. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to this item number 4? It's the last item on our agenda tonight before adjournment. We're going to have a little more discussion now and some questions. Anyone here wish to speak? No. Committee members, questions of staff. An excellent presentation and one of the best visual aids, and I'm a charts guy, okay? This is one of the best visual aids, comprehensive, complete, all-inclusive that I've ever seen.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, Chris.
I just had a question. This is a great presentation, and I really appreciate the visual layout. I think one thing that we talked about a couple of years ago were, in Mountain View, we have Central Expressway, we're thinking about bike and pedestrian improvements, and I noticed that most of these are large infrastructure projects. Are the bike and ped improvements going to occur alongside these? Are they separate projects? Is that a totally separate conversation, or how will that play out?
Thank you for the question through the chair. The expressways is, I think unfortunately, I was looking at this presentation and I neglected to really address the first slide in my presentation. I didn't mention that each expressway kind of has unique characteristics in community context, and that is really important for. We've been operating these expressways for a long time, and they have different character. And I say that not to avoid this question, but I think it's important that I address it straight up. I mean, we are having conversations with the bike community, and we will continue to do so on how bicycles are accommodated on high-speed roadways. I think we are going to evaluate each project in the community context relative to bike ped improvements. That is, if we're spending the money on that stretch of roadway, we're going to evaluate it and see how we can make it best for all modes. There is a category, however, in Measure B called bicycle pedestrian that is more of a competitive category, meaning all of the cities in Santa Clara County and the county will be essentially proposing for grants. So I'm not sure if I answered it completely to your satisfaction, because I don't know that stretch of the Expressway as well as maybe I could. But as we develop projects, we're also, I guess let me just say this, we're going to be in your communities with your city staffs holding community meetings about these projects, and that's also going to inform our decision making to make sure that we're delivering context-sensitive projects.
No, I appreciate that. You're right. Each expressway is different. I know Foothill and Central Expressway have a number of either just bicyclists generally, and was just trying to think of ways to ensure their safety as these projects sort of move along. But thank you very much.
So I want to follow on with that question before I ask my next one. So my understanding with Measure B funds, though, that any of these roadways, as we're making the improvements, they do have to, embedded in their design, have to be addressing multimodal in some shape or form. So I would assume that the answer is when we're looking at each of these expressways, when their project number comes up, such as in the first tranche with 1, 2A and 2B, that all of those would be looking to see what modifications may be made to enhance the pedestrian and bicycle experience. I would assume, though, that we don't have money to just go off and do just solely a bike ped project on any one of the expressways. That is not part of the Measure B funding. That would be, if taken on, would be taken on through the other bucket of money. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, and that's correct. Both of the things you said are exactly correct. The majority of our expressways currently have bicycle facilities that we've invested in. The question gets down to, can you accommodate a bicycle lane? What does that do? How safe is that? What level, what type? Should it be a Class 1 or a Class 2? And those types of things are things that we'll be evaluating. But yeah, both of those things that you said are correct.
Okay, and then so following on with that question then is, with expressways, it's typically delineate but not designate. So while you see these nice wide, such as Foothill Expressway, we see these nice wide shoulders with the striping in there. They're technically not bicycle lanes. They're just understood that they're used heavily, particularly going through Foothill Expressway, very heavily used. But does the county yet have a policy and or standards with respect to multimodal treatments on expressways? And when will that happen if it doesn't exist?
Not to our satisfaction, and that's on us to bring that forward. We don't have we've adopted some complete streets policies as required, and we have bicycle and pedestrian accommodation guidelines, but we have not gone down that path. And we recognize, the differences between a Foothill and a Capitol and an Almaden, and they're all different. And they all have different levels of bicycle usage. They have different roadway characteristics and speeds as well. So it sounds like you've studied it because you know exactly the term that we use, which is accommodate, not designate. And that needs work, and I think we understand that alternate modes of transportation in an urban area like this are very important, and I think we know that we need to make some adjustments, and we're working on those.
Yeah, so I'm particularly sensitive on this one because the number one project on the list is Foothill Expressway in my community. And Foothill Expressway, for those that don't know, it actually kind of splits our community in half, and we've got children who, in order to get to school on a daily basis, are crossing an expressway because their schools are on the other side of the expressway. So if you live on one side, your schools are on the other side. If you live on the other side, you're kind of going back and forth. So for us, it's going to be critical, and and I'm hoping that the supervisors also understand that this is going to be critical for us to have some answers as far as the bike PED. We have children who ride their bikes down the expressway, not as much as trying to cross, but we have a lot of pedestrian crossing, and it's important for the children's safety to have some of these bikes facilities, treatments delineated, because bikes are just as much of a danger coming around a corner as the car is. Okay, my next question is, so everything kind of froze in time as we were trying to make our way through the Measure B litigation, et cetera. So I'm assuming, and is it a fair assumption that in this first step, when you're bringing on a program manager and all, that we're really going to have to kind of update these estimates, because right now they're kind of guesstimates, and I'm not sure how many of those would actually hold given what the cost of roadway construction and all has escalated. And so how will that be resolved? I mean, when you look up and you add up 1, 2A, 2B, and you throw in for good measure the project part of this and project 3, that could very easily exceed that $50 million. So what happens then? How are we going to be managing our way through this?
So, we certainly have been focused on that, and we've been in a lot of conversations with the VTA. I think that the measure itself across many categories will potentially have shortfalls. And so we're acutely aware, because the part that we're working on had discrete projects. Other ones were kind of pay as you go, or how much can you afford. So we're painfully aware that we're probably underfunded, but we kind of just don't know how much. I would add that we won't be doing anything without our Board of Supervisors. After all, at the end of the day, this is the county's expressway system, and our board ultimately will decide on our spending plan and our priorities. We do see it as a regional issue because we're providing services for the entire region. We know that project number 3, we've worked with the city of Morgan Hill. We know that that project is outstripping its estimate. We know that the Foothill project is outstripping its estimate. We just don't know how much, and we don't know, we have to have a comprehensive conversation. This may end up in front of the VTA board as well, because it is of regional interest, but certainly our board. The good thing about the early projects is the local match essentially was the property acquisition and funding for the environmental clearance and the design. Right. So Foothill, it was funded locally. Oregon, Page Mill, both were funded by Palo Alto. Santa Teresa Hale's been funded by Morgan Hill. We will be going out to a bid on some semblance of projects, and we'll probably be working with those jurisdictions on what we can deliver for the dollars that we have. So I don't have, I guess the only thing I can leave you with is we know that we have a problem. We don't know the extent of it. We're acutely aware of it. And in order for us to get out of it, we need to put some engineering effort into this. We haven't been able to put any engineering effort into it because we haven't been in a position to front any funding on these projects, because our own road fund was in such dire straits until the passage of SB1. So that's probably cold comfort, I guess, but that's the best answer I have today.
Okay, and then one last question is, as these projects become active, we reactivate them. I mean, you guys have done a fabulous job engaging with a lot of the communities. I can speak definitely for Los Altos and Los Altos Hills with the Foothill Expressway project. Are you going to go back out and re-engage? Are you going to, so that we can kind of reset expectations, et cetera, before we actually put shovel in the ground?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
John and then Kathy.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Freitas, Well, first of all, thank you very much for this comprehensive report, and I certainly love how you've ranked everything. Seeing how Morgan Hill now has a project in this year's tranche. So I guess my question would also kind of be aligned with the cost adjustments. You had mentioned that you would go to the Board of Supervisors. Are you implying that there might be a potential funding source from the county itself?
No. Well, let me, I guess more directly, I think the local match for some of these projects will be county road dollars. In a lot of cases, we're going to partner as much as we can with the cities. Certainly that's evident by the first 4 projects I mentioned. I don't think to the extent that a project might be significantly underfunded that the county road fund can make it up. But I will say the county expressways are our roads. So if there's an appropriate place to spend county road dollars, it's on our expressways. But we have competing interests too. And all spending for our roads is decided by the Board of Supervisors. And I guess if we could just go to that slide, Ellen, with the 2-year budget, I can describe.
Excuse the interruption through the chair. Harry, just because we have so many new members participating, I do think it might just be helpful at this point to try and provide some clarity in response to the question that you indicate that it is the longstanding policy, whether any of us agree with it or not, that we do not use county general fund dollars for roads and expressways in the county. That's been discussed, but that continues to be the policy, and it's the strongly held view of our county exec. I just
Yeah,
wanted
we would. I
that.
wasn't talking about general fund. I mean our gas tax dollars. It's
Understood.
appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah, but we would never.
Yeah, roads dollars for roads expenses makes sense.
I would just point to this slide. Actually, we wrote proposed budget on this. That the numbers for 1920 are. We just had our first budget hearings last week, and the Board of Supervisors will need to approve this budget in June for our spending plan for the first 3 projects. Now, we've put this funding in our proposed budget, but we haven't yet executed our funding agreement with the VTA. We have VTA representatives here as well. So so our plan, and then we don't do a 2-year budget. VTA does a 2-year budget. So the VTA's told us they're going to give us $50 million for the next 2 years, and that's a tentative proposal for 21-22. But I'm telling you that as of today, the Roads and Airports Department will propose through the county executive that spending plan for 21-22, and it's up to our Board of Supervisors to approve that.
Okay, thank you. So with that, there's also a mention of possible engineering revisions, which I assume would be come under the heading of value engineering.
Yeah, I mean, value engineering is a term that's often used after a project is awarded, and it's a very difficult process. It's when projects go over budget after they're awarded. We would hope to make sure that the project's engineers' estimates prior to award match the budget to the extent possible, or that we identify additional funding before we award, or figure out a financing plan if we think that escalation is greater than the cost of borrowing. So those are all the things we have to explore to figure out the most efficient financial approach to project delivery.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the aggressive approach to make sure that we have complete projects and proper funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just say I've been tasked with representing Councilmember O'Neill, who apparently has been kicked out of the phone system. So she has asked me to ask a couple of questions as well.
She's a big Warrior fan.
Sorry?
Yeah, I said she's a big Warrior fan. I think that's what's going on.
Is that what it is? So anyway, thank you for this. Thank you for the plan. It's very comprehensive. The first question I have, and this came up when we were meeting with staff, Councilmember O'Neill and I were meeting with staff the other day. for the projects, I'm from Santa Clara, so for the projects, 7, 8A, B8B, and 9 are all in Santa Clara. And take 8A, for instance, under the project status, it has reference to Expressway program validation. Could you share what that means? We weren't sure.
Councilmember Watanabe, can you point out exactly what you're referring to? On the placemat that I have in front of me, I don't see that in the status column for Project 8A.
Okay, the one that I'm looking at, the one that we received, let me see if maybe, you know what, it changed. It's actually, the language that's on here is not on here, so,
Okay,
but it was under 8A and 8B, it was in parentheses, Expressway program validation.
Sure, and so given that you've had a couple of versions of this, I'll just say that one of the reasons that we needed to have a resource to assist us with this $750 million program is with $440 million projects like Lawrence Expressway, for all the reasons that Harry cited, making sure that it stays within a scope and cost envelope that we can all live with and that the measure can afford is called program validation. That's one of the first things that we need to do, and an extra set of eyes from an expert that has delivered $1 billion of program like this is wanting to be is what we need, and so that's one of the first steps.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that makes sense. And then, I mean, I can understand the red coloring to the right there regarding the grade separation. I can imagine that those are definitely going to be challenging projects, but I mean, they're going to be great projects, but definitely challenging. Regarding, like for instance, 8A, there's the estimated cost is $440 million. So the cities have to come up with 10% of that. Is that what I heard?
We'll say the partnership. And again,
let her say the city if she wants to say the city. It's a partnership.
Yeah, we'll take it all. In the case, the larger the local match, and for this particular case, the $44 million of local match, which is 10%, is kind of one of those things that's going to be cobbled together from various sources. And I happen to know that from your city, there was already an item that you took up at your council to provide a in-kind right-of-way contribution.
Right.
And that's one piece that we will assemble to the $44 million.
Great. Okay. And let me see. Councilmember O'Neill sent me a question here. Well, going forward, then I would imagine so that $6.5 million balance that's going to be left over from the $50 million. So some of that will go towards program management, or these are part of these mega projects that are going to be occurring on Lawrence. Yeah.
Correct. That early work. After you'll notice that the status does say that a concept study was completed in 2015. You probably know that. The next step after that would be to start the very beginnings of preliminary engineering, environmental clearance, other right-of-way studies, so that we can figure out what the right-of-way price tag is. So all of those things, a slice of it will come from the $6.5 million.
Okay, and when you say right-of-way, are you talking about eminent domain, or has all of that been acquired, or is that part of the process?
To me, eminent domain is always a last resort, of course, but no. So right now we're talking about amicable right-of-way acquisition, where the opportunities present themselves, just like the one that you already took up.
Great. Okay, and then let me see her question here. Let's see. She's asking about the portion of Montague that goes through Santa Clara and San Jose. Is that not in the plan because of San Jose's prior commitment to make improvements in the settlement agreement? So I guess that would be between North First Street up to, I'm looking at the portion, like around McCarthy? And I get this is the North San Jose settlement agreement.
So we've obviously, just so you know, I think both of our The City of Santa Clara and the County of Santa Clara have been engaged by the City of San Jose recently in its desire to bring forward acceleration of their housing production in North San Jose. And that has pointed out some needs that we have to revalidate certain parts of the settlement agreement that our respective organizations came to with San Jose, right? So I'll let that as background. We've evaluated the pieces, and we kind of put together, it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle on this road. There's a piece from the settlement agreement, there's a piece from San Jose, there might be a piece from Milpitas, and then there's a piece from Measure B. So yes, as a generalization, the Montague Improvement Plan is complete with this piece of the funding picture by adding in the commitments from San Jose and our funding commitments as a result of that settlement agreement.
Great. Okay. Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And committee members, without any more lights on, I think we're about to the point of making a motion to forward this on to the board. I just want to say to all of you in roads and airports, this is my 9th year here. It was shortly after I got here that an expressway master plan revise was brought up to me. And all the hours and all the work and all the public outreach to all the cities and all the faces that have changed on this particular committee during that time, all the engineering, the public outreach, all the work that's gone into getting to this point. And I remember a few years ago it was based on the hope that the state and the voters would agree to fund money so that dollars could be diverted towards doing this much needed work, because our population, our transportation is so problematic. This is going to help a lot, but getting it done is going to be painful. You know, these roads we're fixing, got to close a lane. Well, you know, when they're making the repairs. So it's going to be tough getting there. And I see we've got one more light on here before we get to a motion. But it's going to take the elected representatives, each of you, your successors, if it goes on beyond your terms, to help explain to the community the end result will be worth the pain getting there. And we have to do something. And not doing anything is really not a choice. Our problem is getting worse. Our population's growing, and we need to do something. And I'm very, very proud of the county's Roads and Airports Department for being the general contractor, if you will, putting this whole collaboration together, because I don't know if all of you know on this board, on this committee or not, and Harry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Santa Clara County is the only county in the state that owns and operates and manages its expressways. It's the only county. I kid every time I see San Jose people, would you like to buy your expressways? You know, they say no, thank you. So it's a big ordeal. Let's go light here, please.
Yeah, just a couple questions. First, this really looks good, how thorough you've been to look at. So sharing what Jeannie had been saying about the importance of bike and pedestrian with so much traffic. And so when I look down at number 10, great, including pedestrian crossing enhancements at the 280 Foothill Expressway interchange. Sounds great. Good to hear that it'll be coming, again, because children are really using that area a lot, and there's quite a bit of truck traffic. Being down on the list at number 10, the question is, when would you envision being able to get down to the item 10? When would your guesstimate be, or can you even guess?
Sorry about the delay. Harry and I are trying to figure out which one of us is better. I don't think either of us can really map out the exact schedule for every project. This one, as you probably know, the Foothill Corridor is being looked at for pedestrian improvements, not only with project number 1, which covers a couple of intersections, but also with Homestead, Safe Route to School kind of conversation between 3 or 4 cities on that. It's an initiative like that, which I believe Supervisor Simidian kind of championed to a certain extent. We'll drive a project to be incorporated and attacked earlier, I think. So just because on a pure ranking basis it came out number 10, we've always said projects can morph and flex. So right now it stands at number 10. And is project number 10 10 years out? I don't think so. I don't want to say that anything is 10 years out. We want to aggressively pursue everything in the program. But to get to your answer, I wouldn't say it's going to be exactly where it shows. I have a feeling that based on the conversations we're having in that corridor, it will go faster than number 10. That's the safest answer I can give you and the most practical.
To try and add just a little bit more to it, if Cupertino were able to assign the 10%, the 500,000 component, would that make it measurably sooner, or?
Yeah, obviously, number 4 on that one is red. That means that we haven't identified a match as readily just yet. If your offer is on the table as a match, I think that can make things go from red to yellow or red to green. So on that particular component, that doesn't mean that the other things that are yellow in the project won't still kind of need to be addressed, but at least that helps. So yes.
Yeah, the importance of bike and pedestrian safety would have a lot of support, whether or not I can muster enough support to actually put that kind of money. But I'll take this back and see what the sentiment is. So thank you.
Appreciate your help.
Thank you. I think there's also, it's annual tranches of about 25 million the county has coming. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. I want to make sure that the entire policy advisory board is aware. All we've set out here really is the first 2-year funding plan, and then this prioritization exercise for it's a 20-year program, right? And, none of us would imagine that we were able to predict Project 16 versus 15 in the future. So I think the next true opportunity to change the order of these will probably be when we complete the first 2 years of projects. But I think there could be hiccups in projects or acceleration due to funding sources or even projects, and I think that was one of the comments made by the representative from the city of Santa Clara, Councilmember Watanabe, mentioned, well, does the local agency have to fund it? No, I don't think that was ever really envisioned, but I think the county has a lot of the traffic that's being generated on our roadways is a result of the support of the urbanization and the intensification of uses in our various cities. And so the cities have been very proactive in collecting traffic impact fees. And the cities have been very proactive in developing cooperative agreements with the county to share those when they are appropriately applied to the Expressway. So I think it isn't so much as we're asking cities to necessarily put up money, but there's an appropriate connection between traffic impact fees and traffic that's generated in your communities, and then working cooperatively with investing those in the Expressway. So that's maybe another opportunity for projects to get jump-started if there were large developments in the area that needed access or mobility. Long answer, again, apologize, but that's where
it's all right, thank you. All right, with that, I will look for a motion to approve the countywide expressway, well, whatever motion you wish to make. I'm hoping it's to approve it and to forward it on to the Board of Supervisors.
I'll move approval as recommended.
Thank you. We've got a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? I will mention, I'll take the moment to mention at this time, I was in Hollister, San Juan Oaks on Friday, speaking to people there that live in Hollister, and they were complaining about the traffic in Hollister with all the people that live there driving up to San Jose to work. And they said if you don't leave by 4:30 in the morning, it's an hour-and-a-half commute. So it's just crazy around here. The thing is, we're doing something about it, and we'll do the very best we can. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Do you have that one other?
What's that?
Was there one other item on here? The minutes?
Should have been under consent items
No.
5 and 6.
But there was item number, actually, well, no, the version that I have in front of me, item number 6 said approve a delegation of authority.
Yep, that's under consent calendar on my
okay.
version.
So as chair, you're going to be appointing the was there a delegation list or a list on here?
Yep, just for the record, when we did item number 3, which is to approve the consent calendar, I said that was items 5 and 6, and that's what the motion was for. So that would be a yes to answer your question. Did you have some other?
No, I was just curious as to whether, I was assuming with that item that named individuals would be, is this the chair's prerogative to identify those people is how it's done? Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, if there's volunteers.
Are we doing that because we're assuming that either this body is going to disband or is going to meet with such a lack of frequency?
The latter, for sure.
Okay. I'll volunteer if you just need to get a group together.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Otherwise, yes, the co-chairs will review and approve the minutes, and there is no future meeting set at this time because we will be called to assemble as we were about 18 months ago when Roads and Airports needs us to in order to move the program, the process along. All right? Anything else? No. Any other questions? Yes, John? No? We're good. Thank you.